Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Monday, Yom Sheni. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Steve in New Hampshire, Yehuda in South Carolina, Shandor in the Bronx, Guy in Ohio, Paul in the Great Northwest, Melissa in Great Neck, Michelle in Jupiter, Florida, and Chaim in Florida. Welcome, everybody. Oh, my gosh. Sharon, Shalom from Lebanon, New Jersey. Prayers for the shooting victims in New York City. Okay, I don't know anything. I've been so busy working today. I'm not aware. Somebody will fill me in, but I'm just learning about this from you. Sharon, please God, if there are the dead, may the grieving be comforted, and if there are injured, may they be healed. And it sounds like a shooting, so the wicked, evil forces that created this, may they be brought to justice. But I am just catching up. I'm sorry, I don't know anything. Oh my gosh, just so much bad news these days. Bill, you're not here with us yet. But yesterday we dedicated the learning to Bill's mom, and I was just reading a comment, that he had said his mom had him very young, and so his grandmother did a lot of raising, and it was essentially like having two moms, which is like such a blessing. But he lost his nana not long ago, and now he lost his mom. So Bill, I'm not sure if you're listening right now, but I'm just just sending you so much love and warmth, and may you be comforted in this difficult time. Oh my gosh. 1 officer and 4 civilians shot in an office building in Midtown Manhattan. Mass shooting in Midtown Manhattan still playing out. Rose Perosi Shalom. Please God, bring these killers. First of all, stop it so no one else gets hurt. Bring them to justice. Please God, may the wounded have a complete and speedy recovery. I just hate to hear about these things. There you are, Bill. Just got in. I was just giving you a big virtual hug, reading your note from yesterday about essentially having two moms between your mom and your nana. And I was just sending you a big hug. And we dedicate our learning to your mom yesterday, and please God, she should have an aliyah. Her soul should have an aliyah, a great elevation in the world of souls. We say amen. And then I'm just learning from the comments that there's a shooting going on in Manhattan. So we'll just stay posted on that. But please join me in praying that all innocent life be spared, that the injured recover, that the grieving be strengthened, and that please God, these killers be stopped and brought to justice. All right, let's get busy. We have a double daf today, sort of on the short side for 2 pages, but we still have 2 pages to do, and this is going to give us a little bit of a head start, which we want, because there's a lot of stuff coming up, like we're not going to have a class Saturday night. This Saturday night will be Tisha B'Av, starts right after Shabbos, and we don't learn Torah, regular portions of Torah, at least at the night of Tisha B'Av. There are things that we can learn in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, in the Torah, of course, in the various books of the Bible that are appropriate for studying that evening. But we would have to start so late anyway, because once Tisha B'Av begins, we're in a fast. We have to go hear Lamentations read in synagogue. And it would just be too late to start. So we'll miss class Saturday night, which is to say Saturday, and therefore it'll be good for us to be ahead a little bit. I think we're already running 1 daf ahead, but like I said, there's more stuff coming up for me and my upcoming travels, so it'll be good to get ahead. Okay, we're on page 42A, right near the bottom of 42A. We got a good start on 42 yesterday, and with God's help, we'll do 42 and 43 today. Okay, we're in chapter 3, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 2. So Rabbi Yochanan raised another objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from a Baraisa. Rabbi Yosei ben Yassian says, if one found an object in the figure of a dragon with its head severed, but it is uncertain whether, so this, in other words, that this would be some kind of an idol, right? That this was worshipped by some idolater. And in the times that the sages are having these discussions, basically all Gentiles were idolaters. So the issue here is that, as we learned yesterday, if an idolater makes some kind of an idol, but then he removes the idol from its use in idolatry, and now it's just stone or metal, then, excuse me, then a Jew could benefit from that material. You know, who knows, maybe to make marble chips to put in a garden bed. But if the Jew finds the idol, and then he would, just wreck it, tear it down so he could use it as marble chips in the garden, this is not permitted. And the reason was that the Jew, in sort of seeking to remove the idol from its role of idolatry, when he first gets there, he might lift this idol. And if this thing was legally ownerless, and now the Jew lifts it, it's like he has taken it into his possession. And then after that, a Jew who comes into possession of an idol can never remove it for its role of idolatry, and he will never be able to benefit from it. So to sort of guard against that situation, the sages decreed that a Jew does not have the ability to remove an idolatrous object from the world of idolatry. Only the idolater can do that. So Rabbi Yosef ben Yassian says, if one found an object in the figure of a dragon with its head severed, but it is uncertain whether a Gentile severed it, and it is uncertain whether a Jew severed it, so we would say this object is permitted. But if it is certain that a Jew severed the head, then it would be forbidden, because we know that the Jew removed the idol from idolatry, and because of that decree that we just mentioned. But if it is forbidden, and according to Reish Lakish, he asked the question, why is it forbidden? Let it be treated like an object of idolatry that broke on its own. Even if the Jew removes it from idolatry, it would only achieve what would otherwise render this thing permitted for a Jew to use if the idol had just fallen and through the forces of erosion it had come to be wrecked. Can't he just act like the forces of erosion? The answer is no, because of what we just said. And the Gemara answers here too. Rabbi Yochanan's question may be answered in accordance with the opinion of Rava, that the sages issued this decree that we mentioned with regard to this matter, why Jews cannot remove idols from idolatry. Rabbi Yochanan raised another objection to the opinion of Reish Lakish from a Baraisa. Rabbi Yosef says that one may not even plant vegetables in the rainy season under a tree that was worshipped as an idol. Right? So one of the idolatrous practices in ancient Israel was the Asherah, that a certain type of tree, there were idolaters who worshipped the tree. So if a tree, even though it's an organic thing and attached to the ground, but if that tree was ever worshipped by idolaters, okay, so now Jews cannot benefit from that tree. Rather, we need to cut it down and destroy it and not derive any benefit from it. And likewise, we can't derive any benefit from it if it was, tree worship for idolatry. It seems like not even from its shade. Right? So Rabbi Yosef says that one may not even plant vegetables in the rainy season under a tree worshipped as an idol, as foliage may fall on them, which serves as fertilizer. Okay, so that's a different way to benefit from it. And Rabbi Yochanan asked, according to Reish Lakish, why should a leaf from such a tree retain its idolatrous status? Let it be treated like an object of idol worship that broke on its own. And the Gemara answers, well, there it is different. As the main object of idolatry, the tree still exists fully intact. You can't say that the tree broke down just because a leaf fell from it. This is part of the natural process of that idolatrous tree living its idolatrous life, so to speak. Now we're on page 42b. And the Gemara asks, but consider the case of shavings, where the main object of idolatry still exists, and nevertheless, it is taught in the Baraisa cited earlier that if a Gentile shaved an idol down for its own sake, the idol is forbidden, but its shavings are permitted. Right? So in other words, if an idolater had a wooden statue that he worshipped as his god, and he decided that he could improve its look, and he sort of shaved down, carved a little bit to improve the look, and so that involved removing some wood shavings from his idol. Okay, so these wood shavings actually would be permitted for benefit for a Jew because they're no longer part of an idolatry, and it was the idolater himself who removed those shavings from the practice of idolatry. Can we say the same about the leaf that falls from the idolatrous tree? I consider the case of the shavings, where the main object of idolatry still exists, and nevertheless, it was taught in this brisa that if the idolater shaved down his idol, the idol, of course, is forbidden, but its shavings would be permitted. So here too, in the case of the fallen leaves of a tree that is worshipped as an idol, it should be permitted to derive benefit from the leaves, in this case, as if they acted as fertilizer for some vegetables that were planted near the tree. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, says the reason that leaves are not permitted is because the status of an object of idolatry cannot be revoked by its natural manner of growth. Since the falling of leaves is a natural phenomenon, their detachment from the tree does not effect a revocation of their status as objects of idolatry in the same way that shaving the statue, in other words, carving off some wood, that would not be something that would happen on its own if the idolater didn't remove that amount of wood from his idolatrous practice. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish raised an objection to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan from a Mishnah, Tractate Meila, page 13b, with regard to a bird's nest at the top of a tree that belongs to the temple treasury. Here we're going to enter something very interesting. We're going to be comparing some legal rulings of the sages that have to do with trees. Right? Now, on the one hand, we have a tree that we've already mentioned, which was worshipped by idolaters. Now, the Torah mentions specifically that when the children of Israel will be led into the promised land by Joshua, Moses couldn't go, right? Moses was not able to enter the promised land, but Joshua would lead the children of Israel in, and there would be the wars of conquest. And then the Torah says, you shall smash their pillars, right? And destroy their trees, meaning not all their trees, certainly, but just trees that were worshipped as if they are gods. Okay? So an idolatrous tree is considered, it's an object of idolatry. This is the lowest of the low, right? Anything that is used for idolatry, we can't benefit from it in any way. If it's somehow come into our possession, then we have to destroy it. On the other hand, let's say a farmer has an orchard, and he's got trees in his orchard, and he wants to give a gift to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and so he says, I'm going to donate this tree and all the produce that comes from it. Let's say it's an apple tree, right? So this tree and all the apples that will ever forever come from it, I'm donating it to the Holy Temple. So what's he doing? He's consecrating that tree. He's taking it from just a mundane apple-producing tree, which is a beautiful thing. It makes apples, people eat them, and they enjoy it. It has a kind of, sort of inherent holiness, the holiness of all living things, but it's not consecrated. And he is setting it aside and saying, I will no longer benefit from that tree. That tree belongs to the Holy Temple. Its apples, it's going to be given to whoever the temple wants to give it to, or if the temple would like to sell those apples, the profits of those apples will go into the temple treasury, for the upkeep and maintenance of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. So we have two trees, one which has been brought low because idolaters worshipped it, and we can't bring it out of that idolatrous state. And then another tree that has been elevated because a Jew consecrated its produce for the Holy Temple. And now we're going to compare, what happens if there's a bird nest in each of these trees? Can we benefit, right, by, let's say, removing the birds or the eggs from that tree, and let's say eating them or raising the chicks? Just in other words, deriving personal benefit. Is it permitted to derive benefit from something that was used for idolatry? Obviously not. We've been talking about that over and over again. That's why the wine of idolaters, we cannot drink it, we cannot buy and sell it, we cannot benefit from anything that was used for idolatry. May we benefit from something that has been consecrated to the temple? No, for totally different reason. Same effect, we cannot benefit from it, but it's something that's been consecrated. It's because it no longer belongs to us. It belongs to the Most High. It belongs to God and God's representatives on earth, the priests who are running the Holy Temple. they can't derive personal benefit from it either, right? This is strictly going to be used for the upkeep of the Holy Temple. So interesting that personal benefit is going to be prohibited both from the unholy of idolatry and from the holy, which is consecrated. Same effect for obviously totally different reasons. Let's keep reading. So Reish Lakish raised an objection to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan from this Mishnah in Meila 13b. So with regard to a bird's nest at the top of a tree, and the tree belongs to the temple treasury, one may not derive benefit from this nest ab initio. You can't go and take the chick out of it. But if one did derive benefit from it, you're not allowed to do it, but it must be that the law is, liminal enough that if you actually did do it, we're not going to say that you actually committed misuse of consecrated property and you'd be liable to bring a sin offering from that because it's too close to something that's permitted. So what's going on? Right, with regard to a bird's nest at the top of a tree that belongs to the temple treasury, one may not derive benefit from it ab initio, but if one did derive benefit from it, he is not liable for misuse of property consecrated to the temple. With regard to a nest that is at the top of a tree used as part of idolatrous rites, an Asherah, although one may not climb the tree, as that would be benefiting from the object of idol worship, he may knock the nest off with a pole and benefit from it by using it for firewood and the like, right? Because the nest is not really part of the tree. The nest benefited, I guess, from being in the tree, but that's going to be attenuated enough that we're going to say that he can use the nest for himself as firewood or something. That's in the Asherah. If it was a consecrated tree, again, he shouldn't take the chick or the eggs. But if he did, he's not going to be liable for me'ila, misuse of consecrated property. Now, in analyzing this baraisa, it enters your mind that this is referring to a case where the bird broke off branches from the worship tree and he built a nest with them. And yet, the baraisa teaches that one may knock the nest off with a pole and it is then permitted to benefit from it. So apparently, the forbidden branches used in the construction of the nest lost their idolatrous status without human involvement, in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish, that an idol that breaks loses its status. And the Gemara explains, whoa. Here we are dealing with a case where the bird brought branches from somewhere else. The bird built its nest not with branches from the idolatrous tree, but from somewhere else. It was just situated in the idolatrous tree. Brought the branches from elsewhere, and he built the nest with them on top of the Asherah. And the branches were never part of this tree that was the object of idolatry. So now the Gemara comments, the language of the Mishnah is also precise if read with this understanding, as it teaches that with regard to a nest in a consecrated tree, one may not derive benefit from it ab initio, but if one derived benefit from it, he is not liable for misuse of consecrated property. And granted, if you say that the bird brought branches from elsewhere, then this explanation is consistent with that which the Mishnah teaches with regard to a nest in a consecrated tree, namely that one may not derive benefit from it, but if he did, he's not liable for misuse of consecrated property. Whereas if the nest had been built out of branches from the consecrated tree, and then he took it for himself, it would be misuse of consecrated property. So it must be that the bird brought, the branches, the twigs, to build his nest in this tree from somewhere else. So according to this understanding of the Mishnah, one may not derive benefit from the nest by rabbinic law. But if one did derive benefit from it, he is not liable for misusing consecrated property, which is a prohibition by Torah law, as the branches are not consecrated, but were brought there from somewhere else. But if you say that the bird broke off branches from the tree itself and built a nest with them, why is it taught that one who derives benefit from it is not liable for me'ila, for misuse of consecrated property? Aren't the branches consecrated? So evidently the Mishnah is referring to a nest that was built with branches from other trees, in accordance with Rabbi Yochanan's understanding that an object of idolatry that broke on its own is nevertheless forbidden. And the Gemara responds to this proof for Rabbi Yochanan's understanding of the Mishnah, saying, does this argument prove anything? The Mishnah can still be interpreted as referring to a case where the branches for the nest came from the tree itself, and here we are dealing with a case of growths that came afterward. i.e. branches that grew after the tree was consecrated. And the Tana, the Mishnah, holds that there is no prohibition against the misuse of consecrated property with regard to such growths. And another explanation of the Mishnah, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, is presented. So Rabbi Abahu says that Rabbi Yochanan says, what does it mean that one may knock off the nest? It means that one may knock off the chicks, but one may not derive benefit from the nest itself. And Rabbi Yaakov said to Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa, I will explain the Mishnah to you. With regard to the chicks, which can fly away and are not confined to the tree, both here and there, i.e. both in the case of a tree consecrated to the temple treasury and in the case of a tree that was used for idolatry, deriving benefit from them is permitted from the chicks, because the chicks are not part of the tree. But with regard to the eggs, both here and there, i.e. both in the case of the tree consecrated to the temple treasury and in the case of a tree used for idolatry, deriving benefit from them is prohibited. So what's the difference between the eggs and the chicks? As they are not seen as independent of the tree. The eggs can't move around on their own, so right now they're part of the tree. So Rav Ashi added to this and said, and chicks that still need their mother to survive are considered like eggs, and deriving benefit from them is prohibited. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 2. We're going to move on to Mishnah number 3, but I was just really struck as I was preparing for this, between the similar outcome, right? That the branches of this tree, whether it was idolatrous for Avodah Zarah or whether it was consecrated, right? It was, what's the word I want to use right here? I mean, kidashta, that it was consecrated. It was sanctified. I'm not even sure what the word I'm looking for is. Somebody will help me out. But it was mekadesh, right? It was mekadesh. It was sanctified. It was brought into the realm of the holy, and yet the same effect happens that you cannot use it for personal gain. As I was thinking about that, it's interesting, the language, the Hebrew language, right? So the word holy is kadosh, right? It's the same word as kiddush or kaddish. That means holy, and really what the root means is set apart, something that is set apart. You have another word, kadesh, same letters, same exact letters. The vowel is just very slightly different. Okay, same exact letters, but kadosh means holy. Kadesh is a male prostitute. Somebody is considered the lowest of the low, who's engaging in prohibited sexual practices on a professional basis, right, for money. Just for the sake of money, giving into lust, and being involved in just very low and base behavior. The total opposite of holy and righteous behavior. And kadosh, right, so that's going to be kuf dalid shin, with a dot at the top for the O vowel, right? A dot at the top and beside the dalet, the middle letter. And kadesh, it's going to be the two dots underneath is the vowel, right? So you either have two dots below or one dot above. And sort of metaphorically speaking, if you're talking about, let's say, the sexual urge, right? The sexual urge. That's an incredibly holy urge. Why did God give us that? So there would be another generation, right? So that people would get married and have children and create families, and that urge allows us to do that, right? It's just an inherent part of being human and creating the next generation. So if a husband and wife think about, we want to conceive children and bring them into this world. We want to conceive them in sanctity. We want to give birth to them in sanctity. We want to raise them in sanctity. We want to transmit to them the values of the Holy Torah, and that we are a nation called upon to be a light unto the nations, and to disseminate Torah, to give to charity, to care for the widow and the orphan, etc. All these values, incredible, beautiful values that the Torah brought into the world, and that we want to use that urge within that holy context. That's kadosh. And somebody who's just like ruled by his desires, who gives in to his desires, who convinces himself that it's a good thing, to go have sex with whoever, whenever, because, hey, that's what he feels like doing and it's natural. And he'll come up with some philosophy that justifies, just doing whatever he really wants with his basest animal urge. That's Kadesh. Right? The dots are below or the dot is above. And it's not just with the sexual urge, of course, but when you talk about the desire to be impactful in this world, when you talk about the desire to be angry about something, anger can be holy, right? If you're going to be angry that there are poor people who are not being tended to, that people are going hungry, that there's injustice being carried out, and that's going to motivate you to do something about it, that's righteous, that's holy, right? Or somebody who's just a slave to his anger, that's going to go right down into the realm of Kadesh. So, and I think that the lesson here is how close they are to each other, right? Same word, same letters, such a subtle and supple difference, such a nuanced separation between them. It's something that we always have to be working on, right? To live a holy life, meaning to set yourself apart from those base urges, those, all the kinds of wicked things that go on in society. To separate yourself from that takes constant vigilance and work, lest you slip right into Kadesh. Right? Kadosh is what we're always pursuing. Okay, Mishnah number 3 here on page 42b of chapter 3. In the case of one who finds vessels, and upon them is a figure of the sun, a figure of the moon, or a figure of a dragon, he must take them and cast them into the Dead Sea, and not derive any benefit from them, as they are assumed to be objects of idolatry. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says those figures that are upon respectable vessels are forbidden, but those that are on disgraceful vessels are permitted. This will be explained. The Gemara asks with regard to the specific figures listed in the Mishnah, is this to say that people worship only these figures but not any other item? And the Gemara raises a contradiction between this list and that which is taught in another Mishnah, Tractate Chulin, page 39b, with regard to one who slaughters an animal for the sake of, i.e., to worship the seas, right, like the oceans, one who worships the seas, or for the sake of rivers, or for the sake of the wilderness, or for the sake of the sun, for the sake of the moon, for the sake of the stars and constellations, for the sake of Michael, the great ministering angel, or even for the sake of a small worm. In all these cases, the animal is forbidden, as these animals have the status of offerings to the dead, i.e., idols, right? God made dogs. There's nothing essentially holy about dogs. There's nothing prohibited about dogs. I mean, you can't eat it. It's kosher. It's not a kosher animal. But dogs are dogs. They're just a part of nature. If an idolater comes along and he says that, oh, no, this dog is some kind of a god to him and he bows down to it, okay, well, then he transformed that dog into an object of idolatry, and now it's going to be prohibited for a Jew to own that dog, have anything to do with that dog. And likewise, the idolater, by worshiping anything, can turn it into an object of idolatry. Now, how far does this go? This is very problematic. Are you saying that, some idolater decided to worship that mountain, and now the mountain is an object of idolatry, and now I can't go hiking on that mountain? Is that a little extreme and ridiculous? So how far does this go, right? Let's see. And now, where did this law end up? Let's just see. Partially, if one ritually slaughters an animal for the sake of mountains, hills, seas, rivers, the sun, moon, stars, or constellations, his slaughter is disqualified, but it is not prohibited to derive benefit from the meat unless his intention was for worship. If one slaughters an animal for the sake of any spiritual force, from the angel Michael to the angel appointed over a mountain or even over a worm, it is considered offerings to the dead, i.e. idol worship, and it is prohibited to derive benefit from the animal. Okay, so he's not going to render the mountain prohibited, but if he thought he was worshiping the mountain by slaughtering an animal for the mountain, then that animal that he slaughtered will be prohibited to a Jew. No problem there. Abaye said in response to the contradiction, with regard to worship, people might worship any item that they find. With regard to fashioning figures and then worshiping them, only with regard to these three items listed in the Mishnah, which are important, do people fashion figures of them and worship them. With regard to figures of any other entity, people make them merely for ornamental purposes. Again, we're getting a little bit of a peek into their society, right? The idolaters around them, they might, take it upon themselves to worship any particular object at any particular time, but that's so rare that we're not going to pass laws about it. But these particular figures, right, the dragon, the moon, and the sun, that's something that the idolaters in this part of the world were constantly making idols, as part of their rituals of worshiping their own particular gods. And the sun, moon, and the dragon were representative of that. That if we find those objects, we can assume that the actual object was used for idolatry. Rav Sheshes would consolidate the principles of the Baraisas pertaining to this matter and teach. Figures of all constellations are permitted, except for the following celestial objects, the sun and the moon. And the figures of all faces are permitted, except for the human face. And all figures of other items are permitted, except for the figure of a dragon. Again, what can we commonly assume to be part of idolatry and what not? The master said figures of all constellations are permitted except for the following celestial objects, the sun and the moon. And the Gemara asks, what are we dealing with here? If we say that the reference is to one who forms these figures, i.e. if Rav Sheshes is discussing the issue of which figures it is permitted to form, is forming figures of all the other constellations permitted? But isn't it written, you shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold, you shall not make for you. Exodus 20:20. Now this verse is interpreted to mean, you shall not make figures of my attendants who serve before me on high, i.e. those celestial bodies, including the constellations that were created to serve God. Now, there's a lot going on here that's definitely beyond the scope of the class if you want to have a conversation about art and what is permitted. But let's just, for the sake of today's discussion, what we're talking about here is whether people were engaging in idolatry or not, and then the kind of borderline area, and this is, we learned elsewhere in the Midrash, how did people, Adam and Eve, knew God, right? They had a personal relationship with God. Cain and Abel had a personal relationship with God. The early generations were very aware that the world was created by God. And somehow in the history of mankind, the majority of people became idolaters. How did that happen? And what it was that, God did create stars and sun and moon, and there is such a thing as Jewish astrology in this sense that God's energy sort of comes into the world, and it comes through certain channels, and coming to understand a little bit about those channels can help people understand a little bit how the world works. And as they sort of studied the seasons and the stars and the motion of the stars, they would praise God's creations, right? The sort of channels through which God sends God's energy into the world. At first, they would praise these sort of ministers or instruments or messengers of God, so to speak. And after a while, when you had enough people who had never had a personal, interaction with God, so to speak, like Adam and Eve had, they started to, instead of just praising God's creations, worshiping God's creations as separate entities. And that's how idolatry came into the world. So this is something that the Torah and the sages are going to be, very cognizant of and very careful about. So if somebody's making figures of the stars and the sun and the sun and the moon, right? It's not just that they're, making a painting of Starry Night like Vincent van Gogh did, but are they somehow, including such a figure, whether it's on the walls of a house of worship or even just a public building, where they're sort of conveying a spiritual message which could tip into idolatry, and that's why they're going to be very careful. you shall not make figures of my attendants who serve me on high, i.e. those celestial bodies, including constellations that were created to serve God. So rather, it is obvious that the law is referring to a case where one finds vessels with these figures on them, and this is, as we learned in the Mishnah, in the case of one who finds vessels, and upon them is a figure of the sun, a figure of the moon, or a figure of a dragon, he can assume that that vessel was used for idolatry, and so he has to cast it into the Dead Sea, if he's a Jew that finds such a vessel. And the Gemara asks if it is a case, or perhaps even any human, because everyone is commanded not to engage in idolatry, so maybe a Noahide should have to do the same thing. I'm not sure about that. Now, the Gemara asks if it is a case where one finds vessels with these figures on them. Say that the middle clause of Rav Shesh's statement, figures of all faces are permitted except the human face. Now, if it is a case where one finds vessels with figures on them, is a vessel with the figure of a human face forbidden? But then we learn in the Mishnah, in the case of one who finds vessels, and upon them is a figure of the sun, a figure of the moon, or a figure of a dragon, he must take them and cast them into the Dead Sea. And this would indicate that a figure of a dragon is forbidden, but a vessel with the figure of a human face is not. So it seems like the second provision contradicts the first. So rather, the Gemara concludes it is obvious that the statement that the figure of a human face is forbidden is referring to a case where one doesn't find the vessel with this figure on it, but rather one forms the figure. And this is prohibited in accordance with the statement of Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, who states on page 43b that the interpretation of the verse, you shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold, you shall not make for you, is that the meaning is, do not make of me, i.e. do not form the figure of a person who was created in the image of God. So what does that really mean? Are you saying you can't make an artistic statue of a person for decorative purposes? But we've already said that that is not outlawed, at least if you find it. But are they saying, okay, well, if idolaters make statues for ornamental reasons, okay, they did that. And if we know it was not used for idolatry, so we could use that statue for something ourselves. But perhaps Jews who have to maintain an extreme distance from anything that is even like idolatry, maybe humans should not be engaging in sculpture of human faces, even if it has no intention to be idolatrous, because in a sense, since man was formed in the image of God, and now you make an image of the image of God, maybe it's like engaging a little bit in a type of idolatry. Is that what's being said? Let's keep reading. Rather, the Gemara concludes it is obvious that the statement that the figure of a human face is forbidden is referring to a case where one forms a figure, and this is prohibited in accordance with, I just read that. And the Gemara asks if it is referring to a case where one forms the figure himself. Say that the last clause of Rav Shesh's statement, all figures are permitted, except for the figure of a dragon. And if it is referring to a case where one forms a figure, is forming the figure of a dragon prohibited? But isn't it written, you shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold? Now we're on page 43a. And the sages interpret this verse as referring to the heavenly constellations, which indicates that it is prohibited to form only these heavenly figures, the attendants of God, but it is not prohibited to form a figure of a dragon. Right? So this suggests that, well, if you find a vessel with a dragon on it, it was probably an idolatrous vessel used by an idolater in his prohibited avodah zarah, his idolatry. So this thing is something that a Jew cannot own or possess or use in any way. On the other hand, if a Jew makes a statue of a dragon, he's not using it for idolatry. He's just using it for something ornamental. So why should that be prohibited? So rather, the Gemara concludes it is obvious that this law is referring to a case where one finds a vessel with the figure of a dragon on it. And this is, as we learned in the Mishnah, in the case of one who finds a vessel, and upon it is a figure of the sun, or a figure of the moon, or a figure of a dragon, he must take them and cast it into the Dead Sea. If he finds it, he must do that, but that doesn't prohibit him from forming something with sun, moon, or dragon. Abaye said, indeed, the first clause and the last clause are referring to cases where one finds vessels with figures, and the middle clause is referring to a case where one forms figures. So both types of situations are covered and are prohibited. Let's keep reading. Rava said the entire statement of Rav Sheshes is referring to a case where one finds vessels. with these figures. The middle clause is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. As it is taught in Baraisa that Rabbi Yehuda adds to the list of forbidden figures even a figure of a nursing woman and Sar Apis. The figure of a nursing woman is worshipped as it symbolizes Eve, who nurses the entire world. Now, Eve is part of the Torah, right? So there's nothing wrong with Eve in herself, but idolaters might read the Torah and form false conclusions, right? So if they start worshiping Eve as some kind of mother of humanity who is a goddess herself, that's prohibited. That's idolatry. Eve is a human. She's different than you and me in that she was not born of a mother. She was formed by God. But otherwise, she's a human. She's not a holy divine being, and she must not be worshipped as such. The figure of a nursing woman is worshipped by some as it symbolizes Eve, who nurses the entire world. The figure of Sar Apis is worshipped as it symbolizes Joseph, who ruled over, that's Sar, and appeased Mephis, right, that's where you get Sar Apis, the entire world by distributing food during the 7 years of famine, as we learn in Genesis 41. But the figure of Sar Apis is forbidden only when it is holding a dry measure and measuring with it, and the figure of a nursing woman is forbidden only when she is holding a child and nursing it. In other words, these are the signs that some idolater made that statue not for ornamental purposes, but as an object of idolatry. The sages taught, what is a figure of a dragon? And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar explained it as any figure that has scales between its joints. And Rabbi Asi motioned with his hands to depict scales between the joints of the neck. And Rabbi Chama, the son of Rabbi Hanina, says the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Baruch Hana says that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, once I was following Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, the Distinguished. That's his name, Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, the Distinguished. I was following him on the road, and he found a ring there, and there was a figure of a dragon on it. And he then encountered a Gentile boy, right, a minor who was a Gentile, but did not say anything to him. And then he encountered an adult Gentile, and he said to him, revoke the ring's idolatrous status. But the Gentile did not revoke it. Rabbi Elazar HaKapar then slapped him across his face, whereupon the Gentile succumbed and revoked its idolatrous status. Pretty strong-willed, strong-minded, strong-acting incident on the part of Elazar HaKapar, the Distinguished. And now what's interesting about that is, on the one hand, you know, you're not going to go, even in that world at that time, where you know that everyone is an idolater, you're not going to go around slapping people and telling them, don't commit idolatry. Right? Because that would endanger yourself and endanger the Jews. On the other hand, what he's acknowledging is that he's actually helping that idolater, right? He gave him a chance to do it without any kind of coercion. And when the guy wouldn't, he's not going to just say, oh, well, live and let live. You know, you have your truth, I have mine. Because idolatry is prohibited for everybody, right? That's something I'm getting out of that. And so what he was saying is, here you have a chance to remove something from the realm of idolatry. That's a mitzvah. You should do it, right? That's a mitzvah that the idolater can do and the Jew cannot. Very interesting mitzvah. Now the Gemara comments, learn from this incident the following 3 laws. Learn from it that a Gentile can revoke the idolatrous status of both his object of idolatry and that of another Gentile. And learn from it the fact that Rabbi Elazar HaKapar waited to find an adult Gentile, that only one who is aware of the nature of idolatry and its accessories can revoke the status of can revoke an idol's status as an object of idolatry. But one who is not aware of the nature of idolatry and its accessories, even though he's a Gentile, even though he's an idolater, such as a minor, cannot revoke the idol's status, right? So it's not just that it takes an adult, it takes someone who is aware that this statue is used for idolatry for him to remove that statue from the realm of idolatry. He has to understand what he's doing. He can't do it, without knowledge of what it is that he's doing. And number 3, learn from it that a Gentile can revoke the status of an idol even against his will. Rabbi Hanina ridiculed this ruling. Okay, not everybody holds by this ruling. Rabbi Hanina ridiculed it, and he asked, but why was it necessary to give a Gentile, why was it necessary to have a Gentile actively revoke the idolatrous status of the ring? Doesn't Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, the distinguished, maintain in accordance with that which we learned in a Baraisa, in the case of one who saves an object from a lion, or from a bear, or from a cheetah, or from a troop of soldiers, or from a river, or from the tide of the sea, or from the flooding of a river, or similarly one who finds an object in a main thoroughfare or a large plaza, or for that matter anywhere frequented by the public. In all these cases, the object belongs to him. Why? Because of Yeush, despair. In other words, if you're finding something in a situation where it's obvious that its original owner despaired of ever recovering it, right? Like if something flows to you out of the Niagara River in a way that it's clearly went over the falls. Okay, so whoever dropped it before it went over the falls doesn't think he's ever going to get it back. So that thing is rendered ownerless. There's no way to return it to the owner. You're not going to be able to identify the owner. So therefore, it is rendered ownerless through the despair of the original owner. Whereas things that are lost and have markings on them, they hope that it will be found and returned to them. So they don't despair of recovering it. Here we're talking about things that are in a situation where the owner did despair of ever recovering it. Okay, so what about that? Things that are found in such situations, in all these cases, the object belongs to the finder because the owners despair of recovering it. Therefore, in the case of a lost ring with an idolatrous figure on it, its idolatrous status is automatically revoked as its owner despairs of recovering it. Is that true? Right? The owner despairs of recovering it, but he didn't remove it from idolatry. Is the despair of a Gentile over his idol the same as removing the idol from the realm of idolatry? If it is, then it would be okay for the Jew to pick it up, right? If it's not, well, then we've already said that if a Jew does pick up an item that was used in idolatry, he cannot remove it from the realm of idolatry, and therefore he will never be able to benefit from that object, which would seem like, since he found this ring and it was idolatrous ring, how could he, keep it, even to melt it down and use the silver, to give to charity? Even that is not going to be permitted if we don't say that somehow it was removed from the realm of idolatry. So it must be that if it was lost by the idolater in a situation where he despaired of ever recovering it, that does remove it from the realm of idolatry. Seems like. Let's keep reading. Abaye said, granted, the owner despairs of recovering the object itself. But does he despair of its forbidden idolatrous status? Same thing I just asked. Why would you say that him despairing ever getting it back is the same as removing it from the realm of idolatry? The owner does not assume that the object will never be worshipped again. Rather, he says to himself, if a Gentile finds it, he will worship it. If a Jew finds it, since it is valuable, he will sell it to a Gentile who will then worship it. Therefore, Rabbi Elazar HaKapar had to have the ring's idolatrous status revoked by some Gentile, and if he didn't, then he would not be able to benefit from it in any way. So it must be that when he picked it up, he was not trying to bring it into his possession, I think. We learned in a Mishnah there, Rosh Hashanah 24a, Rabban Gamliel had diagrams of the different figures of moons drawn on a tablet that hung on the wall of his attic. Right? Now we're commenting on the idea that Jews are not supposed to draw figures that have any kind of spiritual purpose, let's say, of the sun, moon, and stars. And yet, Rabban Gamliel had a picture that was very much used for a spiritual purpose of the different phases of the moon hanging on his wall. Why did he have that? Because he was taking testimony from witnesses about the new moon, right? That they would set the calendar and proclaim that a new month had begun. This is when the calendar was not yet set, and a new month would only begin when witnesses testified having seen the new moon before the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin would declare which day the new month starts. right? So Rabban Gamliel had diagrams of the different figures of moons drawn on a tablet that hung on the wall of his attic, which he would show to the ordinary people who came to testify about sighting the new moon, but who were unable to adequately describe what they had seen. And he would say to them, did you see an image like this, or did you see an image like that? So the Gemara asks, and is it permitted to form these figures? But isn't it written, you shall not make with me gods of silver or gods of gold, which is interpreted to mean, you shall not make figures of my attendants who serve before me, like the heavenly bodies, sun, moon, stars. In answering this, Abaye said, the Torah prohibited only the figures of those attendants that one can possibly reproduce something that is truly in their likeness. Since it is impossible to reproduce the sun and the moon, the prohibition does not apply to these entities. As it is taught in a Baraisa, a person may not construct a house in the exact image of the sanctuary, right, the holy temple, nor a portico in the exact image of the entrance hall of the sanctuary, nor a courtyard corresponding to the temple courtyard, nor a table corresponding to the table in the temple, nor a menorah, a candelabrum, corresponding to the candelabrum that stood in the holy temple. Right? You cannot make your own home versions of those holy objects. But one may fashion a candelabrum of 5 or 6 or of 8 lamps. Right? The candelabrum in the Holy Temple had 7. And one may not fashion a candelabrum of 7 lamps, even if he constructs it from other kinds of metal rather than gold, as in extenuating circumstances, the candelabrum in the temple may be fashioned from other metals. And the Baraisa continues, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says, one may not fashion a candelabrum of wood either, in the manner that the kings of the Hasmonean monarchy fashioned it. When they first purified the temple, they had to fashion the candelabrum out of wood, as no other material was available. Since a wooden candelabrum is fit for the temple in such a circumstance, it is prohibited to fashion one of this kind for himself. Right? So you can't imitate these holy objects for personal benefit in your house. That starts to infringe on the idolatrous realm. The idolatrous realm. So the rabbi said to Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, do you seek to cite a proof from there, i.e. from the Hasmonean era, that a candelabrum fashioned of wood is fit for the temple? During that era, the branches of the candelabrum were fashioned from spits of iron, and they covered them with tin. Later, when they grew richer and could afford a candelabrum of high-quality material, they fashioned the candelabrum from silver. And when they grew even richer, they made it out of gold. In any case, Abaye proves from this Baraisa that the prohibition against forming a figure applies only to items that can be reconstructed in an accurate manner. Since this is not possible in the case of the moon, Rabban Gamliel's figures were permitted. And presumably, unless there's it's some kind of intention to use it for idolatry, sounds like just having a painting of the sun or moon for artistic reasons would be permitted according to this. And the Gemara asks, and is it actually permitted to fashion figures of those attendants of God, concerning which it is impossible to reproduce their likeness? But isn't it taught in a Baraisa that the verse, you shall not make with me gods of silver from Exodus 20:20, is interpreted to mean you shall not make figures of my attendants who serve before me on high? And apparently this does include the sun and the moon. So Abaye said, this does not include the sun and the moon, as the Torah prohibits the fashioning only of a figure of all 4 faces of the creatures of the divine chariot together. That's from Ezekiel 1:1. Right? When Ezekiel shares his vision, what he saw, when the heavens sort of opened up to him, and he saw angels, and that their faces were sort of constantly shifting between 4 faces. What is it? Ox, lion, eagle, I think, and a human. 3 pairs of wings, upper, lower, and middle, etc. If you try to make, a painting of that, what Ezekiel saw, that would be prohibited according to this. Right, Abaye said, this does not include the sun and the moon. The Torah prohibits the fashioning only of a figure of all 4 faces of the creatures of the divine chariot together from Ezekiel 1:10. All other figures which are not the likeness of the ministering angels are permitted, as long as you're not engaging in idolatry with them, of course. I'm sorry, I should have given you more warning. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara raises a difficulty. If that is so, let the fashioning of a figure of a human face alone be permitted. Why then is it taught in a Baraisa that figures of all faces are permitted except for the human face? And Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, said, I heard in a lecture of Rabbi Yehoshua that there is a different reason why one may not fashion a figure of a human face. The verse states, you shall not make with me, et, and this can be read as, you shall not make me, ot. Since the human being was created in the image of God, it is prohibited to fashion an image of a human being, but fashioning figures of other attendants of God is permitted. Right? We haven't got to the last word on this yet. We're interrupting this lively debate to stop class. And we will continue, God willing, tomorrow at the regular Tuesday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Let me take some questions and comments. Joseph, speaking of benefiting from idolatry, can a Jewish organization accept monetary donations from non-Jewish religious groups? In other words, these religious groups collected money for the purpose of idolatry, right? People who were donating to that group, idolatrous group, they donated money for the purpose of serving idolatry. Now, if that group wants to donate to a Jewish organization, right, a Torah Jewish organization, can you take that money? That's a great question. That's a great question. Seems like no, but I don't know. I think any rabbi that you ask that of would have to do some research and consult with another rabbi, because there's a lot of stuff going on in that question. And I think it would be, depending on the particulars of the case, would have a lot to do with it. Fascinating question. I don't know the answer. Bill, question about the laws around taking a tree out of idolatry. Does the original idolater have to take the object out of idolatry? Say an idolater bought a statue for his home shrine, and he lives and dies and passes it on to his heirs. The idolater's grandson then inherits it. But he's become a Noahide, so he says, this is no longer an idol. It's just a decoration. He sells it. Under these circumstances, can a pious Jew art dealer now buy and sell the statue? I would say that you probably asked that question before we had the ruling about the rabbi, right, who found that ring. And we said we'll learn 3 lessons from it. And one of them is that an idolater can take an object out of idolatry even if it was not his object, right? So a Jew cannot take an object out of idolatry, but an idolater can, even if it wasn't his idol when he did it. So sounds like this guy who inherits it can certainly do it, because at the time that he's doing it, it actually was in his possession, even though it came to him from somebody else who formed it or bought it, etc. Sounds like he could remove it from idolatry, and therefore it would then be rendered permissible for a Jew because it's no longer an object of idolatry. Why is it no longer an object of idolatry? Because the idolater removed it from the realm of idolatry. So Bill asks, what about a tree of idolatry? Can a Noachide take ownership of the tree, remove it from idolatry, and thereby restore it to a tree that Jews can, in theory, benefit from? So interesting. If I don't know, but I would think that an important issue here is who owns the tree, right? And not necessarily, by the way, the one who owns the land owns the tree. We would have to, I think that for, can an idolater come and say that, hey, that tree, that this guy who owns this farm, and then he worships and bows before that tree every day, and this, idolater who's walking by says, you know what, I hereby remove that tree from idolatry. I don't think he has the power or authority to do that. It would have to be the guy who owns the property who removes that tree from the realm of idolatry. But trees are also different, maybe, like, we haven't really heard a case where you remove a tree from idolatry. Maybe once it's chopped down, the idolater can remove the wood from the realm of idolatry. But a tree that was worshipped while it's still alive, can it be removed from the realm of idolatry? I don't know. I don't think we've heard the answer to that yet. Sharon, I seem to remember when in Israel I saw an ancient Mosaic synagogue floors with signs of the zodiac and I believe celestial imagery. Yeah. I mean, we definitely have cases, of like holy art. I think we've seen it. Synagogue ceilings. They definitely have all kinds of figures, certainly of animals, and certainly representing the tribes, but also like there definitely is Jewish astrology. Right? That is, astrology in itself is not idolatrous. It certainly can be done by idolaters, in which case it's idolatrous. But if a pious Jew, engages in Jewish astrology, and I've seen this, there are all kinds of books like this, and just talking about how God's energy comes into the world a little bit differently with some particularities at different times of the year, and sort of Jewish astrology is based on that. Right, then I think illustrations of that would not be prohibited or rendered idolatrous. I just know that these things exist and I've seen them too. How these halachas work, I don't know. Way beyond my ability to tell inform us all about it. But we're going to learn more tomorrow, I would say for sure. Renee, I have read that Asherah trees were really more like poles. And it suggests that they were readily discernible. Interesting. I didn't know that. Very interesting. Very interesting. Samira says, you shouldn't accept from an idolater, but if they donate to a Jewish organization, they can, since they're only supporting belief in the one true God. They do owe Meiser, right, tithing, but you need to ensure that they don't have alternative intentions. I think there's I need to learn more about this, but it's interesting. So if an idolater or an idolatrous organization that has collected money for idolatry now wants to hand it to a Torah organization to support the truth about the one true God, are they in a sense removing that money from the realm of idolatry and putting it into the realm of holiness? It's a very interesting question. I don't know the answer. And I hope we learn more tomorrow and in days henceforth. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Tuesday, at the regular Tuesday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night.